15 minutes. We look forward to hearing Vice Admiral Chopra, please. All yours.
No, sir. Sir, you'll have to press this.
Oh God, what about this?
You have to press this. You can press this.
But this will be covered by this. Yeah. Right. Right. General Ahluwalia, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Many thanks to Claus for inviting me to turn your gaze seaward, albeit for a very brief moment. It's also refreshing to speak from a podium after 1 year, and thank you for that too. I must admit that I was a bit surprised to be asked to speak on the Indian Ocean as a future battle space during a seminar devoted to MDO. I suspect that is, as alluded by certain speakers, because it is applicable to the Navy really only in littoral warfare. And regrettably, in this country, we don't have too much conceptual discussion on joint littoral warfare, which is sad because the Makaran coast of Pakistan has also applied anti-access, anti-denial, and hosts PLA Navy along its line. So it is important, I thought, even if it was not my brief, to comment on MDO from the look from the sea. And I shall do that. Also remember, in today's day and age, the Navy of any nation, reasonably strong, can strike deep inland from any direction of its choosing and submerged. Conversely, you can say you can hit a ship out at sea by maritime strike aircraft or land-based missiles. But it's not really the same thing because the ships are moving and the medium is opaque. Just for a small example, in 1 day from point A, a ship could be anywhere in 3 million square kilometers. And in a 1.5 minutes of a ballistic missile launch, the area that the ship may be could be around 15 square kilometers. So I will comment on MDA. I've also been asked to briefly comment on amphibious warfare, quad, and theater commands besides the Indian Ocean. So I'm going to try and do all that in the 15 odd minutes. But in the interests of jointness, I will have to ask the chair to be a little more magnanimous than he appears to be at the moment. Okay. You know, we keep saying we're a three-dimensional Navy, but there has been multi-domain at sea for a long, long time. And at sea, we look at the following 7 domains. The ones on the right you can call enablers, as we all know. Right. The domains, the sea, of course, right since antiquity, and the Greco-Persian wars, we have attacked the land and vice versa. Undersea came into operation in the 19th century when submarines came into force in the Civil War of the United States. And of course, aircraft have been there since 1911 and in the First World War. At sea, when I joined the Navy in 1975, there itself, we already started having SATCOM and data link. So we've been used to it for almost 40 years. And this is single service, multi-domain or multi-dimensional. And as some people have said, we need to make this is what the usual naval tactical picture looks like in today, or at least for the last 40 years. It is cluttered, but it is how it is. There are these 3 domains of air, land, and subsurface. I mean, sea, air, and subsurface. And you have all these enablers which are there. In the recent years, this is now a slide to show you how much unmanned stuff is there out at sea. It is not just UAVs and drones or UAVs. It is also USVs and UUVs. And all these are integrated into networks, naval ships and fleets. A very, very difficult task indeed. And I am a skeptic about MDO, as I think Dr. Raleigh said, it's a very difficult thing to actually achieve. Now, besides the joint Navy being already multi-domain, the MDO as conceived today is basically an extension of the air-land battle. The Navy and Air Force had the air-sea battle, which became the joint, access and maneuver in the global commons. And we had THAAD FSETs, NCWs. So these are intellectual, conceptual methodologies to try and address change. But just focus on what is in white, which is JADO, which has also been mentioned. What we are really going to talk about, what we need to talk about, is joint all-domain operations. Because the domains keep changing, the jointness will continue, and it requires gigantic fail-proof networking. The jury is still very much out on the concept and the viability. If you read the discourse in various parts of the world, it is an experimental issue, and we need to be careful what our ambitions and our objective are before we make a hash of it, in that many words. The skeptics of MDO, the technological challenge is huge. Real-time networking is a huge problem, especially if you want it to be fail-safe in combat. The MDO networks will be fragile and reliability will be questionable, as they are indeed in all our single service networks and whatever we try and do in multi-domain. The amount of money and time required to set up a viable MDO or JADO network as conceived is huge. And nobody has talked about command and control. In a very fast-moving, hugely overwhelming 3-service or 4-service, intra-service, anti-allies battle space, command and control. We have difficulty in 2-service command and control. How are we going to take charge of command and control in MDO? And of course, as people have pointed out, if you do actually succeed and get to overwhelm the enemy, there is no stopping him, a peer competitor, from doing a first use nuclear option at your very success. So of course there are harsh critics who say this is for relevance and for funding, etc., and it's old wine in new bottles. But let me leave you with this thought, ladies and gentlemen. MDO is by no means a done thing. There's lots of issues involved in JADO also. Please look upon it with the criticality that you should. So in this airline scenario, naval forces can do many things. I just again point you to the white. Navies traditionally have done 3 things with the land: blockade, bombard, and put boots on it. The 3 Bs. And that doesn't change. And that is done after we get command of the sea, like air superiority. But any kinetic action at sea or a firefight will immediately escalate into an armed conflict, and that's why you have to worry about it in MDO scenarios also. Okay, now I've got this slide because we're talking MDO, but I've also been asked to talk about theater. I'll just read this out. Please keep this in mind when you talk about navies. Navies do not defend coastlines. They don't defend static bodies of water. Please be very clear. Most people keep confusing this defending the coast business. Navies are not cross-border forces. They do not fight across borders. They are not limited to our own territorial waters or airspace, even in peacetime. They operate in the international domain, and the globe is their theater where they have legal access. And their battle space is fluid and forever expanding and contracting. They can, as I highlighted, undertake land attack from any direction and even submerge. I'm going to go over the next few slides. I've talked about access from the sea, mobility, impact ashore. Impact ashore is naval task forces can go and sit in any place in the world. Just sit, fully self-sustained. And they bring pressure by coaxing, cajoling, threatening, etc. And they can withdraw without stigma of retreat. And therefore they apply leverage. The instrument of state policy, they can appear over the horizon, disappear. All this is also valid to MDO. and to joint operations and to theater commands. So I thought I'll mention it. Okay, I'm there at the Indian Ocean in half time, not bad. The Indian Ocean has many things for it. Most of you know about it. But the main thing about the Indian Ocean is it is landlocked. Access into this ocean is very difficult, either from the Red Sea in the west or the Malacca Straits and other Indonesian states in the east. Otherwise, you go around Australia or Africa. And therefore, it's not an easy ocean, not an easy battle space for outsiders. The only strong power comfortable in fighting in the Indian Ocean is India, plus perhaps the United States because of Diego Garcia and the Central Command. Nobody else, including China, has here the wherewithal to really fight in the Indian Ocean in combat. All the string of pearls, you heard, old slide. Is this really bases? As I have said to many fora, these are places. They are not bases which can support combat operations. They're okay for peacetime R&R, recreation, and that's it. It's very difficult for these sort of places to, And nobody shows this slide. For all the Chinese string of pearls, there's a whole lot of other Indian, American, which doesn't show the French or the British. There are a whole lot of other places which are also there. So don't get too upset by this string of pearls. This I pointed out as a slide because, of course, I wanted to make General A.K. Singh happy and he gives me a few more minutes. But the Andamans, the Andamans are sitting like this. They are sitting like this. Please have a look. So when we talk of the Malacca dilemma, it is real for the Chinese. You can come through this in peacetime. How the dickens are you going to come through this in wartime? With us sitting in Andamans, with all the aerial, subsurface and surface assets waiting on this side of the Malacca Straits. It's real for the Chinese. They're scared of it. But you guys have forgotten one thing in all these discussions. There is a Pakistan-China naval embrace. We know about Gwadar, but very few people talk about Karachi. The biggest naval base of China in the Indian Ocean is Karachi, where he has got the dockyard facilities to look after his class of submarines and his class of ships. And if he is going to fight in the Indian Ocean, he will fetch up there well in time. And he will not have to go through the Malacca Straits. At least his warships won't. So any building up of Chinese forces in the Indian Ocean is a precursor. You need to get worried as to why is he bringing so many things this side. Because then he can go and sit in Karachi or Gwadar. Certainly not in Djibouti or Hambantota. There is great power competition. I was asked to other threats. This is not really a threat, though US-China could become a live threat. But there's a new alignment to the West. You've been reading last week. There's a naval exercise between China, Russia, and Iran. And the axis includes Turkey and Pakistan. While we are looking east, please remember there's a 5-nation axis developing in the West, in the Indian Ocean, which includes, at the moment, Russia, includes Turkey and Pakistan. This may or may not become a threat. Iran is a problem not just for the US. It could become a problem for us because even if they act in their own interests, if they get funny, this Straits of Hormuz, which I've highlighted to the left, becomes problematic and all our oil comes through here. So if they're fighting with anybody, they don't have to fight with us. They fight with anybody, they affect our energy security. Piracy is dead and gone at the moment, but could come up. Bay of Bengal, both the Bangladesh and Myanmar, again, is an issue. If you ask me as a naval officer, the only problem I worry about is the Bay of Bengal and Karachi, of course, because of this linkage from the sea. Okay, the PLA Navy itself is strong and modern and has done remarkable growth, but we know it has pure maritime geography, stretched lines of communications, little combat experience, few bases and allies outside China, not very much of soft power, no maritime ethos, in short, vulnerable. But this vulnerability is only of use if we take advantage of it. If we don't take advantage of it, then the vulnerability doesn't count. And what can the Navy do? Even now, during border skirmishes, choke points, forward deployment, aggressive maneuver, mark and harass, Andaman activity, South China Sea patrols, interdict in the Straits. All this would underscore Chinese vulnerability, dependence and isolation, and dissuade their actions up north, whether MDO, JADO, or joint. Okay, I was asked to touch upon Quad. Somebody has spoken. I follow this closely. It's wide open at the moment. There's loss of momentum after Trump is gone. Chinese pressure is there on Japan, India, and Australia to desist from Quad. RCEP has been signed by Japan and Australia. ASEAN is coming up with concerns and centrality. So to my mind, Quad is now in trouble, even though it's just a dialogue. Forget about it becoming a security issue or other stuff that people talk about. There is going to be a third Quad ministerial meeting and perhaps a Quad summit of heads of states, but there is no Quad secretariat, no formalizing, no funding. And Quad Plus is just that, plus, nothing much on the ground. There is a talk of a US first fleet being based in Singapore and UK carrier deployments, all of which may impact on Quad. But the bottom line of Quad is this: meaningful grouping only if it retains strategic focus, not becoming all dancing, all singing, economic, etc., etc. It must remain strategic security focus so that China gets the signal. Quad Plus must remain manageable. Malabar must be restricted to 4 navies. Interoperability problems are huge. You can't just carry on. Must be formalized at the earliest. Any attempt to broaden its ambit will render Quad diffused and irrelevant. US lead for Quad is indispensable, or it will fade away due to Chinese pressure on individual members. One last slide, amphibious warfare, not much to say. In the littoral scenario today, amphibious warfare is extremely difficult. Concepts have changed considerably. There is over the horizon the days of huge naval armada coming within 10 miles of shore and putting troops ashore is gone. Even the commandant of the US Marine Corps in 2090 dispensed with amphibious assault as a major focus for the Marines. It's going to be with helicopters, with fast amphibious vehicles. It has low funding priority everywhere. And despite its complexity, as I'm sure my friend General A.K. Singh would agree, it retains its necessity. So we cannot forget this art, and we have to keep adapting it as we go along. Thank you. Questions, if any?